Thank you for coming in. Columbian is pleased to welcome Jay Inslee, Governor of Washington and Democratic candidate for president in 2020. As you know, I'm Greg Jane, the editorial page editor. I believe you met the other editorial board members. And just so you know, we are videotaping this. We will post it unedited on our website, as always. And Governor, welcome. And real quick, Tara, why don't you introduce yourself?
Tara Lee, Deputy Communications Director for Governor
Rona?
Inslee.
Rona Senhas, Southwest Washington Rep.
Great. Thanks again for coming in. I know you don't have a lot of time, and I'm sure you have some topics you want to get to, but I'd like to start with the budget that the legislature passed last week. And what are your thoughts on the budget? It's $52.4 million for 2 years, which represents an 18% increase over the current budget. What is the reason for so much more expenditures?
Well, the reason is we have some brilliant people here, third graders who I just met. Part of the reason, Mackenzie Brady? Is her name? Drake. Mackenzie Drake. I just met a third grader named Mackenzie Drake. They had about 1,000 third graders at the fort celebrating the diversity of this school district. And if you were going to pick one example why this was a great budget, I would think of Mackenzie Drake and her possibilities of having early childhood education, which we help fund. Helping to have a good operating budget for our colleges at Washington State University. And I had a Washington State University pin on, but I gave it to her because I named her Washingtonian of the Day. So I had a Cougar pin on. And perhaps most importantly, to a person like her, we passed one of, if not the most robust, healthiest financial aid packages in the United States, so that students below, anyone with less than $50,000 income, can essentially have a free college education. This is a fantastic advance. It is unparalleled in the United States, and the people who evaluate these things will tell you that we've got the best financial aid package in the United States, and Mackenzie Drake is a person who might be able to enjoy that here in a decade or a decade and a half. So that's one of the reasons, just one of the reasons. But the larger reason is, look, we're a growing state. We have the best economy in the country. Oxfam listed us as the best place to work in America. And CNBC listed us as the best place to do business in America. We have the greatest GDP growth and the fastest wage growth. As a result, people are flocking to the state of Washington, and that means they need services. More kids in school, more calls to the police, more people going to the state parks, and they have to be serviced. The other thing we have to do is fulfill the obligations constitutionally that Washington has to ourselves and our students, including the second installment on the McCleary decision. And it's a $4 billion item, and it's the second installment. I think some people thought we were sort of behind that last biennium. We weren't behind it at all. We had to do the second installment, so that was done. We fulfilled the promise to our educators to have a pay increase to our educators, which is long overdue. And I'll tell you why. The most important thing in a school is a great teacher. And we don't want to lose those teachers to Microsoft and Amazon, as much as I respect those companies. So we've done these things that are necessary to fulfill our obligations. And while we're doing it, we're also doing some really good reform. So we have now started the reform of our behavioral health system, which is overdue. You know, we've been working to try to improve that. And it means such a boost to families who've been touched. And all of our families at one time or another are touched by mental health issues. We had some people there who were there yesterday I met. One of them, his name's Josh. Help me out, Trudy. Joshua. Josh is fine. A young man who I met at Eastern Hospital a few years ago who is, had some real struggles with mental health issues, didn't get the treatment he needed for a while. Now I've met him. He got great treatment finally at Eastern, and now he's going to a Shoreline Community College, doing great. And when you see people, what this means, this is a budget that's had really impacts in people's real lives. And so that's something to be proud of. We've started our broadband effort. We've increased our help to deal with the homelessness crisis. So it's a budget that made both necessary investments that are required by law and some advances that are required by any sense of compassion for people with mental illnesses. We built our response to the opioid crisis to increase our response to that. So And it was part of the most productive legislative session during my lifetime. The productivity of this session and the number of things they did that are first in the nation and best in the nation is as long as your arm. And so that budget was part of that success.
Now, you mentioned the economy and the business climate in the state, but at what point does increased taxes threaten that growth?
Well, it certainly hasn't, because we're the number one place to do business according to CNBC.
What about in the future, though?
Well, we still are.
The legislature came up with a number of new taxes. And
Do
tax
you see
increases.
businesses moving out of Clark County?
Well,
I certainly
the
don't.
taxes haven't even taken effect yet.
No, but do you hear them saying we're leaving? No. We are the most robust economy. We are the best place to do business. And one of the reasons we're the best place to do business is we're financing Washington State University in this community so that they can turn out really good workers, so that we can attract the tech companies that we are attracting to Clark County. It's one of the reasons Clark County is doing so well, because we believe in talent in the state of Washington, and so does Clark County. So we're making investments in our future that is attracting these businesses, that is driving employment. And I would suggest, I'll give you an example of what I mean by that. I think Washington State is a template for the rest of the nation. Because look at what we've done. We've developed a middle-out strategy rather than a trickle-down strategy. So people said, if you increase your minimum wage, restaurants are going to close by the droves. You can't find a seat in a restaurant in Western Washington. We've increased our employment. We were in some of the fastest growing jobs in America. And we have the highest minimum wage in the United States. We've increased this year the first in the nation long-term care plan so that Washingtonians now, as they age, can age with dignity. We've adopted the first public option in the United States. We're doing these things that give security to businesses and employees, that they can be healthy, and that is not only just consistent with economic growth, I would argue it drives economic growth. So it's kind of hard to argue with success. Now, some of the Republicans
Is there a point where tax increases become counterproductive?
Sure, I'm sure there is, but it's not where we are right now. I mean, you just got to look at the evidence. I know evidence is a hard thing sometimes for the Republicans to accept, but the fact of the matter is embracing the policies that we have embraced has driven the most successful economy in the United States. And I can say that with assurance and confidence and a lot of objective information. So it's just really hard to argue with success of the things that we are doing here. Now, we're doing a whole bunch of other things to reform our systems. We're reforming our criminal justice system. We've ended the death penalty. I've offered pardons to thousands of people because the drug laws have driven such racial disparity in our system. We've embraced the best gender pay equity laws in the United States because we're radicals here. We think women should make the same thing as men in the state of Washington. We've got huge expansions in early child education. We have a whole new avenue, and I'm very excited about this. This is one of the many ways that Washington is leading the nation, which is on what we call career-connected learning, or Career Connect Washington, which allows people to have a new avenue to skills development and new careers outside of just college. And we're leading the nation on this. I saw this in Switzerland. I don't know if I've talked to you about that or not, but I went there and saw in Switzerland where 70% of the students are in a paid apprenticeship program, essentially while they're in high school. So we are leading the country in the development of that whole new track. We want to do economic development, not just in the big cities, but in rural communities. And so I'm proud we've started our broadband initiative to get broadband access, because we know broadband access is so important to small communities with their development. So that's only about half of the things we did best in the nation this year. And as we talk, I'll think of the others.
There's also
Okay.
the worker protection of that too.
Well,
Yeah, we've done some worker safety protection issues. We've protected the rights of collective bargaining, which is important in the state of Washington, and I think that we're proud of doing that.
And getting back to the budget, the revenue has grown significantly during this biennium. Lawmakers had more money to work with, but still, were you in favor of tax increases and new taxes? Did you think we needed more revenue to do all these things?
Yes. Do you think we needed to improve student financial aid in Washington State University?
I'm
I
the one
do.
asking the questions.
I'd love to know what you think. I'd like to know what this ed board. Listen, we follow this ed board every morning. This is the first thing we read in the morning, so we'd like to know what you
We're
think.
flattered.
Yes, yes. And I hope the Columbian would say, yes, it was a good thing to improve financial aid for students at Washington State University. I would love to have you back us up on that. I would love to have you back us up saying that teachers deserve a pay increase, not just teachers, but everyone, counselors, nurses, and the educational community. I would love for you to say that these investments in mental health were both necessary, compassionate, and constitutionally required. So yes, I think those things were necessary, and they couldn't be done on fairy dust. We had to come up with the revenues. So these are investments worth making, and when you just look at the raw numbers, you could say, well, why would that be necessary? And the answer is the things that I've talked about.
Now, one of the items was involved the sales tax exemption for out-of-state customers. Have you signed that yet? The eliminating that
Don't
exemption?
think so. I
Where do
don't
you stand
believe
on
so. I think it's part of the budget, and I'm going to largely sign things that are necessary to finance Washington State University and the Evergreen School District and Mackenzie Drake, and so I'll be signing things that are necessary to their education.
He has till May 21st to take action on all
Sure.
of the things that came up from the legislature.
But I will read any of your op-eds on this before I sign it. I'll tell you just one comment if I can on these budgetary issues. Look, this is a pyramid. It's built on all of these blocks. Some of these blocks were not my favorite position. They weren't things that I proposed. I don't believe this is one I proposed. I'm not sure. Do you recall? I don't believe it was. So I don't think this is one of my proposals. But you have to be very cautious of starting to pull blocks out from the pyramid, even if they're not the ones that you think were the best. And so I have to be, as a governor, aware of that, making sure that we finally have a budget.
And just to clarify, do you have the ability to use a line item veto?
I do on certain
Right.
items. I don't know whether it's possible on that specific
Okay.
one or not.
Yeah,
I'll have to get back to you on
You
that.
Follow
know
up
better
with you
than I
guys on
would.
that.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that.
Would you prefer that they pass the capital gains tax
Yes.
as part of this?
Yes, I think capital
Will you
gains tax,
continue to pursue that?
depending on the budgetary needs of the state. But if there is need, I think asking the very well-to-do, that in this case was less than, 1% or so of all the people in Washington, is a better route for revenue than asking working people who are truck drivers and teachers and nurses. So I think that is a better route if revenue is needed in the future, but that remains to be seen. As you know, we have a tax system that's not fair to working people in our state, and so that is one thing I've supported when necessary. But again, I want to emphasize this: when necessary, when there is a need for revenue.
And there was money included in the budget for I-5 bridge replacement. Where do we stand on that? Where do we go next?
Well, we had some good news. My request to keep an office or reestablish an office for about $17 million. Our Department of Transportation thinks there's a use for that, and that was my request, and that's in the budget. There's another provision, I don't know if it was really a mistake or not, but for another $17 million that we can't figure out really how could be legitimately spent right now. So I'm talking to my Department of Transportation of that. I just talked to the Secretary this morning, and we're not really sure that there's anything we can really use that money for right now, because we don't have enough agreement with Oregon to figure out what the parameters of the design is to really be able to start the pre-design process. So I'll be talking to Oregon to see if that can happen in the near term, to see if there's a way to be able to usefully use that money. We don't know whether we can or not, so I've got to do a little more research on that. Obviously, we want to move forward with the bridge, and we have an upcoming, although I don't think it's scheduled right now, meeting with the governor and other legislative leaders in Oregon to talk about the next steps. We do know we have to reach, and you've heard me say this before, we have to be able to forge a consensus across the river to be able to move forward. We have not had that consensus to date. To accomplish that, we need the support of the legislators from Southwest Washington. they have to be able to reach an agreement with the legislators in Oregon about the basic design of this bridge. I cannot dictate to that. I would love it if they'd given me that authority. All problems would be resolved. In fact, we would have had this bridge under construction 2 years ago. So it's really regrettable that Don Benton killed this bridge. I still harbor some frustration about that. But we will be talking to Oregon in the near future to see how we can take the next steps.
What about the current Southwest Washington legislators? Do you feel, are they building some consensus on the bridge?
Well, I think
Do
there's
you
been...
think you'll get more cooperation than 5 years ago, 6 years
Well,
ago?
I would hope so, but that hasn't broken through yet. The fundamental issue here is that if I was czar, I would fix, which is that Oregon wants to have particular types of public transportation options on the bridge. 60% of Southwest Washington wants to join Oregon in that effort. Maybe 40% of Southwest Washington does not. As long as that 40% can throw a monkey wrench into this bridge, we can't build a bridge. So that's just a reality. So there has to be a consensus developed in some sense. I'm in favor of building a bridge. I prefer having public transportation options, but one way or another, I'm in favor of building a bridge. But to do so, we have to reach a consensus, or I have to be appointed czar, one of the two. And so we need legislators
Which do you
here.
think is more likely?
But we need legislators to be able to forge that consensus, and until that happens, we will not be able to make the progress that we need, I want, and I'm dedicated to.
So you're still seeing a little bit of a gap there between the consensus that's needed and the amount of consensus that currently exists in
Yes.
Southwest Washington.
Yes, unfortunately, we do not have the consensus needed out of Southwest Washington to be able to really advance any meaningful design or even pre-design of this bridge. I'm going to do everything I can to try to develop that. But,
How do you go about that?
well, we're going to talk to Oregon. We're going to continue to talk to legislators here in the hope that they will open their minds to certain approaches. I've tried to convince them that I think the sort of fear-based thing that killed the bridge in the first instance should not be allowed to kill it in the second. I think that'd be just
Meaning what kind of fear-based thing?
a fear that people in Portland are going to ride light rail into Vancouver. Now that's something I never understood, that those people somehow would pollute Vancouver. I never got that. So we need the Republican Party to get over that and start making decisions based on modern transportation technologies rather than the fear of Portlandia. I don't even know if they watch the show, but I don't think that's going to ruin Southwest Washington. So I'm hopeful that that could continue to develop. I'm just trying to help people keep open minds.
Can you talk a bit about the clean energy initiative that passed the legislature?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, we, again, as in so many cases, are leading the nation in the vision of growing an economy around clean energy. And I'm very pleased with what we were able to accomplish this year because the legislature passed my 100% clean electricity bill, which is
And
leading...
that's by 2045?
Yes, but but importantly, it has landmarks before that. So it will shut down the last coal-fired electricity in 2025, and it will require carbon neutrality, and that's a term of art, by 2030. These are the fastest deadlines in the United States. And I'm very proud of the bill because it was very sophisticated because it provided a lot of environmental justice. That means that it provided subsidies potentially for low-income people with their utility bills, and it provided environmental justice for working people to make sure that there are decent wages paid in these new industries as they develop and the collective bargaining rights are respected. So it built in these ideas of environmental justice into the system. It also required utilities for the first time, we think in America, to have an implied cost of carbon in their planning and the regulatory structure. So it's first in the nation in a lot of different ways. And I think it's consistent with what we've learned in Washington already is that we're growing clean energy jobs like crazy. And we now have almost 50,000 electric cars on the road. We've built a $6 billion wind industry. And if you recall, the last time people objected to our effort, they said we were going to crater our utilities and we either wouldn't have electricity or our rates would skyrocket. That just doesn't happen because we've had these new technologies come in. The cost of solar has now come down 80%. Cost of wind has come down 20%. And I think we can be confident that the technology will continue to address. We also passed the best building code law in the United States that will call for fossil free based new commercial buildings starting in 2030, and that's a big step forward. And also it's the first in the nation because it will require retrofitting of existing commercial building with some ways to get that done. That's the first in the nation. We also are one of the first since the U.S. Climate Alliance called for this. So I think we're the second state to ban hydrofluorocarbons, these super pollutants, which is really an important step. These things are horrifically damaging on the climate crisis front. We also passed an incentive bill to incentivize to give people help to get access to electric cars in a reasonable way. That is a very thoughtful approach, I think. And there is a fifth bill that for somehow is escaping my attention right now. So it was a really big step forward in our effort against the climate crisis, and importantly in the effort to build our economy, because we're doing that. We're doing that here with polysilicates for solar cells. We're doing it at Moses Lake, where we're the largest manufacturer of carbon fiber for electric cars in the Western Hemisphere. We're doing it in Lind, town of 350, where we have the largest solar farm in the state. We're doing it at Grace Harbor. We're making biofuels and hopefully increasing our production. So this is really an exciting time.
You know, you mentioned it's a pretty aggressive timeline on that.
Mm-hmm.
Is it a realistic one? Do you think the state can meet those benchmarks along the way?
Yes, and there are several studies that are out. One from a Stanford professor that looks at this, and I'll send those to you so you can take a look. They talk about the ability to forge a 100% clean electrical system, and I think that the discussion about this is really the discussion in the difference between, confidence and determination and sort of fear and limited imagination. Give you an example on that. So in 1940, the United States made exactly 77 Jeeps. 1940, 77 Jeeps. In the next 4 years, we made 640,000 Jeeps. That's the type of scale that the United States economy is capable of doing. In 1940, how many Liberty ships did we make in Clark County? What, 0? How many do we churn out 4 years later? What was the number? Do you guys remember? I don't remember what the number was.
Oh, it was 100 or more.
Yeah, they were coming off there like it looked like Lucy's in the Lucy I Love Lucy assembly line. An Ethel.
The chocolate.
They were coming off that Liberty ship line. I mean, really, that's the type of mobilization that we are capable of in the United States economy, and I believe that it is necessary for take the same level of mobilization. And the reason is, the science has told us this is our last chance. We do not have as much time as we thought 10 years ago, and the science is irrefutable on this. You saw, and it keeps coming in. The thing that's disturbing is it just keeps getting worse. You saw a few days ago the UN reported potentially 1 million extinct species, and climate crisis is one of the reasons for that. Today, interesting statistic, climate crisis is not a single issue, it's all the issues. It's economic loss. People say, how are you going to pay for this? I go, well, how are you going to pay for Paradise, California that burned down, a town of 25,000? How are you going to pay for the utility industry, largest utility in California, just went bankrupt? How are you going to pay for the floods? I'm going to Iowa next weekend where there's been $1.5 billion. How are you going to pay for that? And you look at the health impacts of fossil fuels today, there are over 10,000 more people die of pollution from automobile tailpipes that are caused by automobile crashes. This is a health issue for us. And as we clean up our transportation sector and our electrical system, we're going to get healthier. We're going to have less people die of these respiratory diseases. We're going to have less kids have asthma. We're going to have fewer kids have Lyme disease, which is now spreading north. This is a big deal. I talked to a couple in New Hampshire about a month ago whose daughter had to drop out of college for 2 years because she got Lyme disease from a tick. They hadn't had ticks in New Hampshire before, and they're spreading north. So I think that this is both a health, economic, and national security improvement for the United States. We know this is a national security issue. The Pentagon has on multiple occasions told the president this is a national security threat. We had former Admiral Fallon, Andrew Fallon, in Seattle a few weeks ago to tell us about this, about the intelligence service briefings that the president is ignoring. And the things he says about this just blow your mind. He said, you know, he's wrong. He said wind turbines cause cancer. Well, he's wrong. They cause jobs. And so that's what we're after here. And I'm proud of our legislature. They did some great work.
I think we have about 5,
Okay.
7 minutes left. I know we got started a little late, so I want to make sure you get
No
the full
problem.
time to
Yeah,
talk
thank
about.
you. And as you go around the country, what kind of reception is this message receiving? I would think here, we like to think we're a little more cognizant of climate change and the issues involved and the potential involved. Is that message getting across to Middle America?
Well, it is, because we're not as unique as you might think. We're unique because we're the best in so many ways. By the way, we're the most humble state as well. I just want to make that clear. Okay. But as far as the recognition of the climate crisis, we're not that unique. And the reason is, you know, it's hard to be against doing something on the climate crisis when you're standing knee deep in the Missouri River 5 miles from where the riverbed used to be. I was in Hamburg, Iowa, and you know, it's 5 miles from the Missouri River. It never flooded before 1858. It's in Houston, where yesterday they had these torrential rains and big flooding that is unprecedented. It's Miami, where they've had to build up the road a foot and a half. When you go shopping in Miami today, you have to look down at the shops. It's the weirdest thing, because they've had to build up the roads, and all these shops flood when there's a king tide. It's California. You know, I went to the foothills north of Los Angeles and talked to people, said, I get climate change now. Now I get it, right? And so this is what used to be a line on a chart when I wrote my book, or co-authored my book in 2007, is now a reality. People are experiencing it themselves. And it's true in our state. I've lived here for 68 years, and we've never had to shut down our swimming pools before because of smoke. And we had to do that last summer. We had to close swimming pools. Kids couldn't go out swimming because of smoke. So this is something people are experiencing firsthand, and Hillary Franz just warned us that this season could be as bad as the last two. That's unpredictable, and so now people are experiencing it. So people are getting it. But more importantly, actually, is that everywhere I go in the country, I can point to jobs that are being created. I was in Nevada a couple weeks ago, where you can point to them making batteries for electric cars by the thousands. I went to one of the largest solar farms at Copper Mountain Solar Farm, one of the largest in the nation, where I talked to IBEW members who had installed, these are good union jobs. In Iowa, where almost 40% of the electricity at times comes from wind turbines in Iowa, and the jobs are prolific in Iowa. It's in Michigan, where we're making, in Orion, Michigan, we're making electric cars for sale. It's in Grays Harbor, Washington. And the thing that's cool about jobs in clean energy is they're not just in Seattle. They're in Moses Lake. They're in Lynn. They're in Bellingham. They're in Grays Harbor. These are small communities where we can grow jobs, not just for physicists, but for carpenters and laborers and IBEW members, because we're going to have to retrofit our buildings in our homes, and those are construction jobs. This could be the largest construction job in American history, in rebuilding our built infrastructure. And these are for working people with hammers and saws and skills. And so this is an enormous job creation. And you could talk about that anywhere in the country.
Now, if,
I'm still not number one yet, though. I would want that point in the polls.
depending, and good luck on the presidential campaign.
Thank you.
If that does not go as you hope, would you consider running for governor again?
I have not ruled out
Okay.
that. But
Do you have
we're
a
intent.
timetable for when you would have to decide?
No, I really
Okay.
don't. I'm focused on this, and we're focused on making sure we have enough donors to be on the debate stage, and people can go to jinslee.com if they desire and send in $1 and help us, because we got to get 65,000 donors. So we're still a few thousand short, but we'll get there.
What's the deadline for
Second week in June, I think. I'm not sure, but we are pretty confident getting there. But we could always use a little boost.
What have we not touched on that you want to bring up?
Well, I think we signed the vaccine bill today, and Clark County has been an epicenter of this discussion. We met some nurses at the third grade outing today that were very appreciative because they've been fighting it. Thanks for the nurses and the educators and the teachers have been.
Editorially, we strongly support.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. It's been very helpful. And we have to make a decision based on science, not misinformation. And I think that we need more people to read your paper rather than just some of the information that floats on the internet. It's one of the symptoms of a free internet that there's so much information out there that people have read that just isn't so. It's just false. And I actually, I can understand why people have concern if they accept the credibility of some of this information that's floating around out there, but it just isn't true. And we have to make decisions based on true science rather than internet rumor. And we had to make that decision, and I know that's contentious with some folks. I just shook some of their hands at the signing ceremony today. But this is necessary for public health. It's based on science. It's based on drilling down in the science. I've looked at the science to make sure it's credible. So I'm glad that we made that step forward, and I hope it'll reduce measles in our state. And again, we're one of the leading states in the country. There is one thing I want to say that I hope that people will understand how productive the last few months were in our state's capital. Now, I know you're running against 200 years of history to say good things happened in the legislature. It's very difficult. It's a man bites dog story. But the number of things that were done on a productive basis to help Washingtonians was truly stunning this year. I've been in and out of public life since 1988, and there is nothing that's approached this legislative session on the number of and the scope of issues that they've dealt with just in the last week. And so I think Washingtonians could feel really good about the progress that we've made as a state in the last few months. And I think it's actually pretty stunning. I think, 14 or my 18 bills that I asked for?
16 of 18.
Maybe 16 of 18 got through. And the thing that's impressive to me is the scope of everything from behavioral health to opioids to clean energy. The rape kit solution, some of the work with the statute of limitations on sexual crimes. I mean, we have covered the map on progress, and I think that's a story, to be honest with you, that I think is really good news.
Great, thank you. Craig,
Thank you.